Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it seems as if Bishop Athanasius Schneider has come out in defense of the validity of the papacy of Pope Francis in light of recent events where it has been declared by some that Pope Francis is not the Pope, if he ever was. Before we get into this, I'll let my views be known. I do believe Pope Francis is Pope. I have investigated the various positions about sede vacantism, which means the seat is vacant in Latin. If you're not certain of what that term means, sede vacante, seat vacant. I have investigated it, I guess as in depth as many. And while I do find strong arguments that I understand why people consider such arguments, especially in light of the crisis we've had since the Second Vatican Council. The one place where I find a sticking point especially is the authority to declare that the Pope is not the Pope, whether that be the more traditional sede vacantist opinion where it was John the 23rd who was not the real Pope or lost his office, or whether people start with Paul VI. There is a brand of sede vacantism that starts with John Paul II. They do believe he was validly elected, but then lost his office at a certain point. Again, there are strong arguments for the fact that the various popes since the council have said things that definitely do sniff of heresy, if not do seem to be materially heretical, at least in some cases. There are strong arguments from Robert Bellarmine and Cajetan and various others like Suarez and these sort of big names in scholastic theology who do talk about losing an office or a pope being removed as a possibility and things like that. And they exist, but where I always find there to be something limited is this idea that you can declare it as such and especially hold others to that opinion. I don't have that authority and virtually nobody does. It is not the case that lay people do not have the authority to recognize someone as a heretic. The scriptures are very clear. You know, in certain cases, you treat someone as a heathen and a publican, as it says. You know, you recognize that somebody is heretical. How that works in an official juridical capacity, I have no idea. But it is very clear from traditional theology and the scriptures that, yes, if somebody is manifestly, in the best estimation you have, a danger to the faith, could be your priest, could be another neighbor, it could be, in sad cases, a hierarch such as the Pope, where there are things where you scratch your head and you go, there's just no possible way to square this round peg. If that's the case, then people make their prudential judgments about how they might personally deal with another. That's very different. But to make the declaration as if someone is in a position to do so and hold others to that opinion or act towards others, act unto others, as if that opinion must be followed, that's where the problem arises, in my opinion. So enough of my opinion. I'm not as smart or nearly as holy as, if I'm holy at all, as Bishop Schneider. And so let's go and see what he has to say. So here you can see the article, Bishop Athanasius Schneider on the validity of Pope Francis. And here we go. Oops, I should have clicked the article, not just show you. Okay. It begins by saying, and I'll make this a little bit bigger, begins by saying there is no authority to declare or consider an elected and generally accepted pope as an invalid pope. The constant practice of the Church makes it evident that even in the case of an invalid election, this invalid election will be de facto healed through the general acceptance of the newly elected, of the new elected by the overwhelming majority of cardinals and bishops. This I find to be a little bit fascinating. It does seem to me like Bishop Schneider is not only talking about the recent events that have emanated forth since Father Altman made his statements. It does seem like Pope. It would be great if Bishop Schneider was Pope. It does seem like Bishop Schneider is taking, I don't want to say a shot. I don't mean it in like a negative sense where he's attacking someone. But it does seem like he's adding the consideration of the opinions out there that Pope Francis was never validly elected, which is the thesis that some people follow who believe Benedict was still the Pope. He didn't resign properly and things like that. That's a rabbit hole. I don't have the qualifications to go down every strand of that. I know there are differences of opinion about how that even takes place. There are some who believe Benedict was still Pope because of these reasons. There are some because of others. If I'm speculating, I imagine someone could retort to Bishop Schneider and say something like, well, Pope Francis could not have been elected because Benedict didn't resign properly. Maybe that's what they'd say. Anyway, it does seem like he's kind of going after that opinion as well, so it seems like perhaps Bishop Schneider has been thinking about this for some time. He continues, even in the case of a heretical pope, he will not lose his office automatically, and there is no body within the church to declare him deposed because of heresy. Such actions would come close to a kind of heresy of conciliarism or episcopalism. The heresy of conciliarism or episcopalism says basically that there is a body within the church, ecumenical council, synod, college of cardinals, college of bishops, etc., which can issue a legally binding judgment over the pope. That's actually quite fascinating. That is fascinating. As far as I can tell from my research, there are some opinions that in theory, members of the church could depose a pope in the same way members of the church vote in and elevate a pope, meaning the church herself has the authority to bring the pope in, therefore the church herself has the authority to bring the pope out. That's an opinion that's been held. So for Bishop Schneider to say that there's no possible way to do it is fascinating that he's taken such a hard line. And granted, it is in the realm of theological opinion. Historically, it's not like it hasn't been defined. But this is fascinating because ironically, or coincidentally, I guess, the fact that the Second Vatican Council and its aftermath has promoted this error of collegiality. Notice I don't say heresy. Heresy and error are very different things, and I'm not saying that there was positive heresy in the Second Vatican Council. There were definitely certain spots about religious liberty that seem to be very much error, and religious liberty may be a heresy. Gary Gou-Lagrange, the greatest Thomist of the last century, was clear that if it's not a heresy, it's at least an error. So I'm just not making that statement fully personally from my position. But anyway, one of the greatest errors that has come forth, at least since the council, whether you want to say it's because of the council or because of the effect of the council, however you want to split those hairs, is the problem, the error of collegiality, which is basically this illusion that we have these national churches and these bishops' conferences. This gives us the grave problems we see in Germany, for example. Now, it is true that historically there have been bodies of bishops in various countries from a perspective of, yes, there's a unity there from a national perspective, but they have pretty much set themselves up like independent doctrinal bodies. And interestingly, Bishop Schneider is defending the papacy against this overstep of these episcopal bodies as a way of defending the papacy, even though the papacy since the council has consistently defended the framework that puts the papacy at risk, if that makes sense. We see here the disorder and chaos that has been fomenting since the council, and it takes a bishop like Schneider, even though it's an unpopular opinion to defend Pope Francis as such, for the dignity of the church, is defending the traditional doctrine regarding the papacy. Anyway, I find that fascinating. He goes on, the theory of the automatic loss of the papacy due to heresy remains only an opinion, and even St. Robert Bellarmine noticed this and did not present it as a teaching of the magisterium itself. The perennial papal teaching never taught such an opinion. In 1917, when the Code of Canon Law, Codex Iuris Canonici, came into force, the magisterium of the Church eliminated from the new legislation the rank of the Decretum Gratiani of the old Corpus Iuris Canonici, which stated that a pope who deviates from right doctrine can be deposed. That's fascinating. I did not know that. Never in history did the magisterium of the church admit any canonical procedures of deposition of a heretical pope. The church has no power over the pope formally or juridically. The sure Catholic tradition says that in the case of a heretical pope, the members of the church can avoid him, resist him, refuse to obey him, all of which can be done without requiring a theory or opinion that says that a heretical pope automatically loses his office or can be deposed consequently. Therefore, we must follow the surer way, via tutior, and abstain from defending the mere opinion of theologians, even if they be saints like St. Robert Bellarmine, which says that a heretical pope automatically loses his office or can be deposed by the church. Therefore, the pope cannot commit heresy when he speaks ex cathedra. This is a dogma of the faith. That's very easy to understand, too, when you look into it. Maybe we could just talk about that briefly here. The reason why that's not possible is because there are certain stipulations that must be in place before the Pope speaks ex cathedra for him to be able to do that at all. It's not like a magical power where, if he wants to speak from the chair, his mouth is shut by some mysterious power or something. For something to be an ex cathedra statement, there must be evidence that he is appealing to what is sound dogma to begin with. So it's actually quite easy to understand why that's not possible. In his teaching outside of ex cathedra statements, however, he can commit doctrinal ambiguities, errors, and even heresies. Fascinating that Schneider is saying this. And since the Pope is not identical with the entire Church, the Church is stronger than a singular erring or heretical Pope. In such a case, one should respectfully correct him, avoiding purely human anger and disrespectful language. Resist him as one would resist a bad father of a family. Yet the members of a family cannot declare their evil father deposed from the fatherhood. They can correct him, refuse to obey him, separate themselves from him, but they cannot declare him deposed. Good Catholics know the truth and must proclaim it, offer reparation for the errors of an erring pope. Since the case of a heretical pope is humanly irresolvable, we must implore, with supernatural faith, a divine intervention, because that singular erring pope is not eternal but temporal, and the Church is not in our hands but in the hands of Almighty God. We must have enough supernatural faith, trust, humility, and a spirit of the cross in order to endure such an extraordinary trial. In such relatively short situations, in comparison to 2,000 years, good point, Your Excellency, we must not yield to a too human reaction and to an easy solution declaring the invalidity of his pontificate, but must keep sobriety, keep a cool head, and at the same time a true supernatural view, and trust in divine intervention and the indestructibility of the Church. Bishop Athanasius Schneider. So there you have it. Bishop Schneider is of the opinion that declaring there to be no pope is not something that anyone has the authority to do, and I agree with him. Again, people may disagree on one point that he has, and there is somewhere where a thoughtful person could say that it is possible for the Church in some capacity to depose the Pope, because that is something I think there's more, I think there is more possibility for something like that to take place than there is for this automatic loss of office, if I'm being honest. But nonetheless, that's still not defined, and it's, again, in the writings of great saints. But, this is something, ladies and gentlemen, that we should probably speak about for just a second. Great saints are not infallible. Because great saints are not given the charism of infallibility. They are, even the Pope, again, can make mistakes when he's not being Pope, so to speak, in an official way. There are also opinions that various theologians hold that are very strong, But over time, when more information is kind of considered, then there's a different definition. This is the true development of sort of the sense of the faith and the doctrinal development of the church. There are various times in church history when something that is very new arises, a new type of crisis, a new type of heresy, that sort of thing. And in those situations, there is this intention on behalf of theologians and great men of the church to work out these ideas. This is why we find clearer and clearer definitions being made at councils and things like that. And until something is defined, there is room for a healthy conversation. We might even say something like a debate in certain confines. The modern way of debating that many people want to engage in is not really in line, as far as I can tell, with how Catholics have traditionally engaged in debate. The way that Catholics engage, or many people in general engage in debate today, is a very Hegelian, very Protestant idea of just smashing ideas together to find the truth. Whereas historically, debate amongst Catholics importantly, was much more refined, usually written. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation for another day. But in any case, great saints have ideas, especially during times of crisis. I mean, during the Arian crisis, the Protestant crisis, things like that, the various popes at Avignon, the different popes at Avignon, the time of 3 popes in the church. Great saints can have opinions that later are found not to be as extensively, full or correct as those which are defined by the church, and that's fine. There's nothing that takes away from their sanctity for that. Everyone knows I'm a great proponent of Archbishop Lefebvre, and often, there will be people who they'll say, "Well, look, I found something here in Freudian slip. Found something here in Bishop Lefebvre's writings where I think that the consensus after him is different than that. And look at him, he made a mistake or something." And listen, if you find something that you don't think is the general consensus of the church in all cases in the writing of a saint, this is not an indictment on the saint. We should probably look at our own theological abilities before we start judging the great saints of the church. That being said, Bishop Schneider is a prelate of the church, and he's in a position to say, yeah, I would have to, take what Robert Bellarmine said seriously, but at the same time, this is a hypothesis of his, and this is not dogma of the church, and there's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. Given that we are in a crisis in the church, if you do want to find your way through, you can find my book, SSPX The Defense, on Amazon. And I'll just pull that up here quickly. You can find this book on Amazon. Thank you to almost 5-star, 4.9 stars. It's been very successful, and I've received lots of great feedback. If you'd like to support the podcast, this is one of the best ways to do it, is to buy my work. And some people do ask, where can I buy it besides going to Amazon? If I'm being honest, Amazon's the best. Buy that at Amazon, and I get the best rate for it. Oh, look at that. Frequently bought together, me and my friend Taylor Marshall's works. Well, I guess they're both decent books. I did read Taylor's audio book for that book for Amazon or Audible, so pretty good. In any case, as always, ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think in the comments. This has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time, God bless.